Hello, Instructor Figueroa. My name is Angel Chevarria, and today I will be presenting you with the Columbine High School massacre shooting that happened in 1999. We're going to cover this and dissect whether it was the fault of the kids' upbringing or if it was the fault of violent video games. So, here's our cover. Columbine High School massacre. Who's to blame? Video games or upbringing? Now, when it comes to introduction, I have a couple of pictures here. We have two people, two teenagers, basically. And we have Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. The main question here is, was the massacre influenced by violent video games, or was it the upbringing of these two young individuals? So a little bit of backstory. We're going to cover introduction right now. In April 20th, 1999, two students from Columbine High School in Columbine, Colorado, decided to take multiple firearms into the school, along with explosives. They had everything packed in their backpacks, and their goal was to basically kill as many students as possible. And not only students, but also teachers and anyone who really got in their way. Now, the reason for this is that it was said that the students, they were outcasts. They were not your typical popular kids. They didn't do normal things that other children were doing, other teenagers were doing. And they had such hatred for their school. Mostly they wanted to target jocks and Christians is what was said. And I also do have all the sources on the Works Cited page, so we can double check on that as well. But right now I'm just covering the overall picture of it all. And they went in carrying a pistol, an assault rifle, shotguns, explosives. Luckily, the explosives didn't go off. So Eric specifically would go into the cafeteria during lunch hours because it's considered peak time, and he would count how many people typically on average would be in the cafeteria. And so depending on going off of that, he decided his targets would be around 450 people or so. So thankfully the explosives didn't go off, but that's what he was estimating. So in total, these two students killed 13 people. It was 12 students and one teacher. And along with that, injured 20. So 13 people died, 20 other people were injured. And of course, as you can imagine, everyone else in the situation has been traumatized ever since. To this day, this is considered to be one of the most deadliest school shootings in the world. It was a very big case at the time. Like I said, Dylan Klebold was 17 and Eric Harris was 18. So only a year apart and very young. Both boys in their teenage stages, they showed signs of aggression, depression. One of them wrote in their diary or journal that they had suicidal thoughts. And they were very discontent with their life, very angry at the world. But why? What caused them to want to hurt so many people, specifically kill so many young people? So, okay, now my portion of the project I will be covering Are violent video games to blame for the situation? Um, so these two kids obviously were not born with such hatred. What caused this? So basically, during the mid 1900s to the late 1900s, video games were very popular. Um, they did they started off very innocently, these games, and as time went on, popularity with the games grew. Um, Video game creators decided that violent video games were gaining more traction, so these games were becoming more popular. So there was more and more of these games being created, and it's known that Dylan and Eric specifically really enjoyed playing these violent video games. It's said that Eric specifically loved playing Doom, which is a video game. And I have a picture of what the typical gamer would see when they're playing the game. So this is a screenshot from the video game Doom, and here we have a picture of Dylan. And so in the video game, there is a character named Arlene, and Eric would typically record himself doing violent things, such as shooting. He did a school project one time, which came across kind of violent. He used very vulgar language, and in one of these videos, he is seen calling his gun Arlene, which is said to be his favorite character from the video game Doom. Doom is considered to be a more violent video game. As you saw right now, it's basically a first person point of view shooting game, and there's blood, you're killing people. That's the point of it, to hurt, to cause harm, to take someone else's life. So Eric names his gun Arlene after a character from Doom. And the boys, typically, it's thought that they used these video games to vent and to kind of express some sort of their hatred and their anger that they held deep inside. So it was kind of a release for them. They would fantasize about harming others and just doing horrible things. And the boys even dressed in dark black trench coats. They wore dark sunglasses, black leather gloves. Basically, kind of, I would suggest, building a character of their own. They became a character in what they typically saw in these violent video games. Dressed to kill, basically. And this is how they arrived on April 20th, 1999 at Columbine High School, when they decided to do what they did and aim to kill multiple people. And so, like I said, they recorded themselves doing all kind of things, talking very aggressively, acting very aggressive, using vulgar language. And typically, if you're not familiar, people who play these video games usually communicate with other players in this way. Very vulgar language, a lot of curse words, just very mean, using phrases like, oh, I'm gonna kill him and this and that and stuff like that. So that's just the environment that these games have created and have turned into. So, immerse yourself into a world of violence. And again, as you can see, here we have Dylan and Eric dressed in all black, dark trench coats, and he's pointing a pistol at something. So, a fact about this is that Harris was so fascinated by the game Doom that he decided to create his own mini game inside of the game. So he created his own version of Doom, which was very similar to the way he fantasized about the school shooting. And as we understand, these video games are meant to inflict harm on others, kill people, and usually you don't receive consequences in these games, right? So it is believed that these two kids also didn't want to suffer the consequences of their actions when they shot up the school. They ended up committing suicide after they did what they did. They killed themselves there in the school library before the authorities even got to them. So they didn't want to deal with the consequences that came with their actions. They decided to take the easy way out. And that's, players in these games don't suffer consequences. So there are similarities there, real life and in the game. So violent video games have not proven to have, without a doubt, any effect on teens, but it is possible that these teens do become desensitized to violence because they're playing the games all of the time. They're just so accustomed to it, and they enter this world constantly, and to them it's just another game. It's entertaining to them, and they don't seem to have any sympathy for the storyline of causing harm to other people. Not every child ends up doing what these teenagers did, but of course there's been plenty of kids, and I have a source it is in the Maldonado source under Works Cited, that there were a couple kids on there who mentioned that they did become a little bit desensitized while playing these video games, desensitized to violence. And these kids were only 14 and 16 years old. So it does have some effect on children, as some of them have admitted to it. And let's see. These games also can somehow give people who already have these sort of mental illness to hurt other people. These games can kind of give them ideas as to how to hurt people. Not only do they inspire these kids to act upon their actions, because in the game it's so fun, it's so entertaining, that they become inspired to do so in real life. They want to gain all the power, they want to do this. So these games, it's sort of like a practice for them. Some of them who do have these deep thoughts about actually hurting other people. So these video games, not only do they showcase violence, but they also show how to act and how to be violent. So here we have video game revenue and violent gun deaths. This is showing different countries. And here we have an image of Eric Harris. So, one of the sources that I have also, you will find that Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, a former professor of psychology, he says that first-person shooting games are, quote unquote, murder simulators, because you're so immersed into this world that you're in it, you're in the world, everything feels real to the player. And I think that video game creators, this is the point that they try to, this is their goal. They want to make it as realistic as possible. So that could have effects on the players who are actually playing the game. And eventually, the family of the victims of the Columbine High School Massacre decided to sue entertainment companies of these video games. They attempted to sue for $5 billion, but unfortunately, the case was dismissed. The families claimed that the shooters were influenced by these video games. So many people knew these students, Eric and Dylan, played these video games, violent video games, and they themselves believed that they were influenced by this. They were inspired by these games, that they had ideas from these games. They wanted to make it their own reality. So the judge dismissed the case, stating, quote unquote, there was no way the makers of the violent video games and movies could have reasonably foreseen that their products would cause the Columbine shooting or any other violent acts. But the content creators, the video game creators, intended for it to be realistic. So there's such a fine line there. You don't intend for people to go and hurt other people, but you want to make it as real as possible. It's a very fine line there. So because they make it so realistic, how does this not become addicting and desensitizing to violence, and kind of intriguing for people to carry out in reality? So a study found in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, it's this source is also listed under the works cited page. It's the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. A study in there states, quote unquote, students age 13 to 17 who played more violent games engaged in more aggressive behavior. So the study has proven that these teenagers who are so easily influenced, because at this point, these kids they're not adults, but they're not completely, their mind hasn't, they don't know who they are. They don't know what they want. Their hormones are crazy. They don't understand a lot of things. They are easily influenced. And so by playing these video games so often, it can kind of alter their way of processing things. They will react in a more aggressive nature. They will become a little bit more violent to everyday things. So that's what that study has covered and proven. And these video games, players who play these video games, in a way, I believe that they gain this sense of power by taking another player or character's life. They feel higher than the other person that they just took the life of. So people, we've seen many cases in history, people are always power hungry and they will do anything to gain that power. And so, like I said, kids are so easily influenced, and these kids were such outcasts. They hated their school. They wanted to take matters into their own hands. They wanted to have some sort of revenge. They wanted to hold the power. And that was their goal. The shooters, real life shooters always have the goal to take matters into their own hands and gain all the power. And works cited, like I mentioned, that was my portion of the project. And if I could suggest any proposal as to how to prevent this from happening further, I believe that if parents, parents should revise what their children are doing, whether they're teenagers or they're not, right? If they're still living under your roof, sometimes there will be signs of mental illness. Are they stable enough to play these violent video games? If not, it is the responsibility of someone who is aware of this situation to prevent them from playing these games. Because my partner in the project will cover this later, but I've read that parents did see some signs of aggression, and looking back at it now, they realize they probably should have done things differently. And so maybe I think for children, it's a sensitive topic. It's very risky to talk about. A lot of people do not like to be told how to parent their kids, but it mostly falls on the parents, because who else is around? Parents or guardians. I believe that they should be mindful and be aware of what their children are, the way they are expressing their emotions. I think that's a very big one. Talk about their mental state. How are they doing? It doesn't have to be upfront. Just ask how they're doing. Go from there. Are they doing good? Are they not doing good? Why or why not? Is there any instance that caused this? Things like that. If there's already issues going on, I don't think allowing them to dig themselves deeper into such a dark hole is the best for neither these kids or anyone that is within their environment, because it could be harmful to many. So that's my portion of the project and the presentation. Thank you for your time.